I think absolutely, and this is one of the most dangerous things. Really, I think it's really important to be able to sort of get the scope of each of your services right. This is where sort of domain-driven design comes in. We want to be making sure that our microservices are cohesive. They're not too big. They're not too small, which is actually quite difficult to do. Um, if you get it wrong, you can sort of get stuck in this downward spiral, right? If you're sort of looking at Conway's law, where the team sort of will build its own products, and the organizational structure of the wider company sort of determines the product. Then, if you sort of get the split of the microservice wrong, then your organization can sort of become siloed. And that can sort of be quite difficult to get out of. I've seen it happen a few times before. Um, Even if your microservices are cohesive, then you've got to make sure that they're sort of communicating in the right way. You're embracing an asynchronous nature because if you're not doing that, you can actually make things worse. So it's sort of like those three things that the microservices gives you: autonomy, scale, and operational resilience. You can actually make all of those three things much worse if you're not careful. So it's very much something you've got to be very cautious when sort of moving into a microservices based environment. Um, you just sort of put that effort into making sure that you've got the right sort of split of services. I'm not sure if this is something you've witnessed as well, Dave. This sort of difficulty that people often have.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially if you've already got a quite monolithic landscape and you ask people and say, would you say that your IT is a bit of an unstructured mess? And if the answer is yes, then it kind of begs the question, well, are you going to be able to manage that complexity when you're making even more components and those components are getting even smaller? So yeah, I think that there is always a risk that things get unstructured, and that you do just create more silos. And if people aren't communicating about what their services does and what APIs it offers, people just go up and end up creating more and more things and get those domains overlapping. So like Dodders was talking about, really the important thing is the domain driven design aspect of it, making sure that you know the boundary that you're in and where the edge of it is and what your responsibilities are and what the adjacent ones are. And that's really complicated. It's really hard to do, even with quite big monolithic systems.
Yeah, I think also the challenge is like you're never going to get it right the first time. Like obviously requirements sort of emerge as a project goes. Like, and if we're being agile, we're not going to try and gather all the requirements up front. So it can be difficult when we realize that our application has evolved to the point where it no longer makes sense to split up our domain like that, and it can be quite difficult to restructure that because again, if your teams are running the microservices, then it might mean that you actually have to, you know, you might have to carve a team up, you might have to move some people around. So you need to sort of be quite flexible if you are going to sort of embrace this evolutionary aspect of microservices.
I think for me, the single most important thing would probably be to make sure I had the right core team that does the first load of work, because that's going to be the kind of pattern that everyone else then replicates. So the first API or the first topic, the first set of contracts, the first set of unit tests or API tests, whoever does those first is probably going to be creating like a template that everyone else follows. So I guess what I would probably be wanting to do is make sure that I had a really good, but probably quite small team doing the initial work, and probably give them enough time to have a few iterations to actually do some experimentation and see what works and see what doesn't, and wait until they tell me that they're comfortable with the approach and they're saying, yes, we're ready to kind of scale this up now and get more people involved, and then sort of take the cue from that to bring more people in.
I think my answer there is going to be really in the weeds. I think I would say for me the most important thing is sort of embracing asynchronous nature of microservices communication, getting used to living in a world of eventual consistency, and sort of embracing it, not trying to sort of circumvent it, and being kind to your database. I think like not trying to do too heavyweight database transactions because these are the things that sort of really eat up the capacity in a system. You can sort of get away with it in a monolith because everything's on a single machine, but in a microservices based architecture, especially if you're in multiple AZs or regions, you very quickly sort of eat up all of the system capacity. So unless you're sort of embracing this world of eventual consistency, then you very quickly will hit a brick wall in terms of scalability, and you've sort of, the main reason you move to microservices based architecture might have been to achieve scale, and you've actually made the scale worse. So unless you're sort of really prepared to embrace eventual consistency and asynchronous communication, then you should be cautious about moving into this in the first place, I think.